548 Enterprise. It is a full-scale development organization that helps people, in metropolitan communities really build out their communities. It is 100% Black owned. It really focuses on ensuring that historically marginalized communities are engaged and integrated into the conversation about our clean energy future. And he's just doing some really, really incredible things across the board. This chat is going to be hosted by Rose Stevens Booker, who is the Director of State Transformation here at the BDC. We're super, super lucky to have Rose. She has come to us from the Department of Energy and previously from Energy Star. She's really worked hard on, spreading the good gospel of electrification and clean energy from within the government, as well as outside areas like Block Power, where she was the head of partnerships as well, I think. And from there, if you have any questions, please, again, drop it in the chat. And welcome to Rose and AJ. Rose, I will let you take it away.
I'm muted. I should have, learned that by now in our pandemic world, but that's all right. Hello, hello, hello. I'm excited to be here and to see so many folks join this morning or this afternoon, time zone specific. Maybe Jess or Ashley, if you don't mind taking the PowerPoint down and we can just do faces for now, that might be great. Also, something I'd like to ask, if your comfort level allows, your name in the chat, where you are right now, any associations or orgs. This is the first BDC Presents for AJ and myself, and we'd love to get to know you guys more. So put anything in the chat that you want to shout out to us, and we'll be sure to see it. So please grab your coffee, your tea, your lunch, get comfy. We're just going to talk today and learn about who AJ is, 548 Enterprise, decarbonization, the highs, the lows, helping folks, communities electrify, and the revolutionary ways that AJ has approached this work and tackled market barriers while doing so. So with that, AJ, we got a quick digestive bio from Jess, but I really wanted to kind of open the conversation, starting with this human experience and your story and all of the influences and lived experiences that have really guided you into this work. So perhaps could we just start with like childhood and humble beginnings and key influences that have gotten you where you are today?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you guys to the entire group BDC for hosting and this conversation. Look forward to learning more about everyone involved. I'm AJ Patton, founder of 548 Enterprise, which includes the 548 Development Company, which does our real estate, as well as 548 Energy Solutions, which does our solar and EV charging installations. And then we have some nonprofit work that we do under the 548 Energy Institute. In terms of how we got our start, I would give you two kind of brief stories. One, in 1999, my mother received a $400 gas bill, and she was making $10 an hour. And so unfortunately, we got our gas shut off. And so for almost a year, we had to boil water to take a bath. And that was in Terre Haute, Indiana. And so for approximately a year, we put four pots on the stove, on an electric stove, carried up a flight of stairs and poured it into a porcelain tub. And that's how we bathed ourselves. That story to some people sounds like the 1800s. And to others, that sounds almost third world-esque. But when I'm in other markets like here in Chicago or Newark or Baltimore, many people just nod their head as if that is a rite of passage, sadly. And so that stuck with me, regardless of what happens in the rest of your professional career. That becomes kind of branded in some ways on you in terms of that experience that you have to carry with you. Fast forward, I was able to go to college and finish college and start with an investment bank called Equities First that is out of Hong Kong. Their North America headquarters were in Schaumburg, Illinois, which is a Chicago suburb. And I was working my way up, and one day I ended up being VP of domestic investments, so head of all U.S. investments. And a firm came in pitching us as a utility solar company and said, hey, why don't you come in? Why don't you guys give us millions of dollars to invest in our solar deal? And it kicked out like 5-6% returns. And my bosses at the time, 5-6% wasn't even raise an eyebrow. They were 15s, 20s. That was the only way you could get their attention. And so, but they knew they had to sell me in order to get to the bosses. And so I said, look, the bosses aren't going to do this. 5% is not enough. But let me pose a question. You're building a solar and you're going to sell all the energy and tax credits to Google and Target. Had you ever considered selling to everyday people? And it was an awkward silence. And the CEO took me serious, even though I was like 25. And he said, you know what? The problem with selling to everyday folks is that this is 2014-ish, is that you would need to find the building owners and, go the individual door to door, and finding those building owners is such a headache and so cumbersome, and it would change our model completely. And there wasn't community solar mostly in the Midwest at all at that point. And so I said, well, what if I owned a real estate company that had thousands of units, and I owned the solar company, and I could provide discounted energy to my own tenants? He said, whoever does that's going to change the market. And so I quit my job. That's the response my mother gave too. So I quit my job and I started 548. 548 is the unit number in the projects and public housing that I grew up in. And so everything's branded that way because we want to state the name of the company is the mission. We're staying focused on investing in disinvested communities. And we want that to kind of be our flag that we carry in all of our investments and across all our projects. So that's a bit about who we are and how I ended up doing this.
Oh my gosh. Investment banking to quitting your job to creating a new business model that is pretty altruistic. Maybe you could give us a little bit of a deep dive in terms of how do you balance that? How have you balanced that in the past in terms of the business entity side and knowing that you can bring and do the right thing in the communities in which we live, work, and play?
Yeah, I push back on the concept that we can't do well and do good at the same time. And so, I still believe that capitalism can still work for everyone. And I don't distance myself from that. This is, most of what we do is on the for-profit side. But it's about how you go about that execution is the impact piece. And so one of the things that I care a lot about is who gets the jobs in the process. Sometimes we can't, most of what we do on the solar side, and we'll talk more about jobs and inclusion more, but at times, state statute on some of our solar projects say that we have to give that energy away at a 50% discount. That's significant. Sometimes it's only 20-25. But impact is in many layers. It's not just lowering the people's utility bills. It's who gets the jobs. Is there job training? Were you intentional about community engagement and outreach? Are you tangible? I take a great deal of pride in the fact that, me and my team, you can get a hold of us. We're in the community all the time. You can, I don't got handlers or security guards or any of that stuff. You could just walk up and we can have a conversation. And so I think it's important that, we have open sourced our strategy. You could take and run with this. This is not proprietary. And so I think you can, because frankly, I welcome the idea. I don't know if we would consider it competition, but we welcome that more people should be doing and utilizing our strategy. So yeah, I think we can do well and turn a profit.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I want to get into all of those different verticals within the model, but maybe taking a step back from the beginning of this venture, what was it like to lay the groundwork for this enterprise? How did you get started? Were there any barriers that social, economic, all of the above that you encountered, that, you know, probably maybe you shouldn't have, or that it was just like a few other hoops that you had to jump?
Well, I think a couple, you know, I'll do this and I'll try to do this in like small stories. I'm also a new dad, so I'm getting used to story time here.
Ah, yeah, I love it.
Right. So, you know, it was received poorly by my circle and family that I was going to quit this good job and start the company. I think
Mhm.
a lot of people had, you know, as families kind of work together to sacrifice to get a kid through college and get them into the profession, and then that turns into, you know, coming to your hometown and telling them that you're quitting your job to start a company named after the projects. What the hell are you thinking, right? I actually have a photo of that moment of my parents telling them, and you know, it ain't the happiest photo. I'll say that. But to the headwinds, you know, frankly, you know, it was, I had never started a business. No one in my family owned a business. That wasn't kind of a thing. And it was absolutely terrifying. And in all fairness, it took a while to get off the ground. And I sounded a little bit like a madman. You know, we went to every institution, angel investor from Connecticut to San Francisco, telling them that solar powered affordable housing was the future. And in 2014, 15, 16, 17, I sounded like it wasn't connecting. The market wasn't ready, and or people did not believe that I was the right messenger or vehicle for that. And so, as much as people wanted to connect those dots, we tried to use 548 as the bridge for that unification of interest of sustainability and affordability, but people just couldn't get there. And maybe, you know, at the time wasn't the right pitch man or what, but it took us years. And you know, as luck would have it, if you believe in luck, if you believe in other things, I lost every dollar from my bonus that I had been using to start the company with. And I believe so much in this that I started driving Uber. And so from 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. and from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m., I was driving Uber. And from in the middle of the day, I'd have a suit on, taking all my meetings and working on the business. And I had a sign on the back of my seat when I was driving. On the back of the seats and both sides, I have a solar startup, ask me questions. And I had a stack of business cards this high. And about a year goes by, and I'm driving Uber during the day, in the mornings, working it during the day, driving at night, 80-hour work weeks. A young man gets in my car and he's going to see the movie Black Panther. And he gets in the car and he says, "You really got a solar startup?" "Yeah, I'll do a coffee with you." And we do coffee. And 6 months later, he wrote me a check for $2 million and he joined my board. And that's how we got our seed capital. So I'm obligated to say Wakanda forever for those who know anything about Black Panther. And that is the story of how we got our seed capital to get started. And we've been off to the races ever since.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh. I mean, don't tell Uber and Lyft that. They'll want a percentage of that, I'm telling you. Okay, so fast forward. Tell us about one of the first projects. Take us, you know, from start to finish. And, you know, while you're doing that, maybe we can also throw up some of the projects that you have in Chicago, just so people have a kind of a glimpse. But tell us about your whole entire portfolio business and one of those first initial projects, and what y'all do, like on a nitty gritty, so we really understand the start, you know, the cradle to grave.
Yeah, sure. So this photo here is kind of a highlight of our larger projects, but I'll start smaller. We started with a couple of Six Flags, and you know, kind of the idea and the thesis was start small, make a boatload of mistakes, and then scale up from there. And then as you do the scaling, then you kind of figure out what your coalition looks like. And then kind of take people with you, cherry pick the winners of the kind of the coalition of engineers and contractors and designers, and then you kind of build your team on the fly. And so we started with 2 Six Flags, and then we quickly purchased the building that's there. If you go back a slide there, that building at the bottom that says 1370 West 79th Street. We got started there. And those are all gut rehabs. That's a 1370 West 79th Street is a mixed use building, 30 units plus 7,000 square feet of commercial retail. And we gutted it. And we went to the community saying, let's do maximize energy efficiency. We're going to put VRF systems. We're going to pump in fresh air, smart thermostats. These are all the LED lights, low flow water, all of that. And, in these communities, the only fresh air that you're getting is if you crack a window. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about continuous fan, makeup air units, smart thermostats, and VRF. I mean, no one is doing VRF in this community. And one of the concerns is, would we even have contractors to service this? But we genuinely believe that this was the right thing to do. And so we started there with the 6 Flats and 79th Street. And then a young lady by the name of Lori Lightfoot becomes the mayor of Chicago. I say that tongue in cheek. Hopefully you guys already know who Lori Lightfoot is. She becomes the mayor, and she rolls out a program and says, I want to invest $1 billion in disinvested communities in their core corridors. And I want proposals from developers. Let me pause because I'm going a little bit out of sequence. 79th Street, what it did to me was we thought our impact was sustainability. What I learned at 79th Street was as equal as important as sustainability was who got those jobs. Mm. Who was the contractor? Who was the engineer? Who was the lawyer? Who was the insurance broker? Who was the electrician? Who did the asphalt? Who built those back decks and bridges, those back stairs, which is important in Chicago. And what I found was equally as important is that if I was intentional about going to the South Side and letting South Side contractors rebuild one of the most important corners on 79th Street, that I could get buy-in from the community, both about the importance of sustainability and the importance of rebuilding your own community safely. Mm. And so, and then I kind of had a bit of a light bulb moment where I said, well, hold on. I'm the lead investor and developer. I pick who gets those jobs. So I'm going to pick people from the neighborhood. And so I picked people of color for every dang seat. And I didn't hide it. And I stuck my chest out and made sure the bank understood it, that the community absolutely loved it and embraced it. And we've had no problems at that building. And frankly, it's one of the most celebrated projects we've ever done. And then fast forward, Mayor Lori Lightfoot announces that she's going to do $1 billion in these neighborhoods that have never been invested in. And she's accepting proposals. And she hears that there's some little guy out south talking about sustainability and inclusivity together. And her team calls and says, you better respond to the RFP because you guys got something over there. And so what you're seeing now highlighted between Humboldt Park, Gallery 89 South, Humboldt Park Passive Living, and 4300 West Roosevelt are where we won RFPs to some of the largest developments in the city of affordable, sustainable developments in the city of Chicago. And so I always have to tip the cap to Mayor Lightfoot about her intentionality. Frankly, I say this all the time. He's the first mayor that didn't play the donation. You got the game. She genuinely cared about the merit of what we were doing. And heaven forbid we get back to merit. I think that needs to be re-injected into our society. And so that was spectacular. And so we've been off to the races.
So you brought in, I guess for some, a new network of workforce, from the financing to the construction, energy solution experts, and unequivocally saying, these folks, this diverse network, just as accessible, just as qualified, we're going to show you. How do other people do that? I think there is a misconception. that it can't be done. It can't be expanded on. It can't be, re-articulated in other localities. And, I think I'm one who kind of like puffs my chest and says it can be. But AJ, some people just, they need it on a piece of paper.
Well, and it's funny. I gave one of these speeches in DC 2 weeks ago. And one of the questions that we got, it was a big old crowd. And the people asked pose the question, how do we be more inclusive with our supply chain and with our spend and so forth? And I dead serious looked right out to the crowd and said, leadership. Mm. Maybe because I'm from a small town, or maybe because I'm only 5'8", that I got this chip on my shoulder, but there's nothing you can't do. You can't tell me you can't find a Black engineer in the city of Chicago. You don't know one female lawyer? Like, I'm looking at you weird if you don't know a female lawyer. It's not that, it's not that hard when you try. And so, when I showed up to the groundbreaking at 79th Street, I told the state treasurer, the city treasurer, the alderman, the mayor, and I asked every contractor to stand up and stand next to me for the photo op and for the groundbreaking. And we showcased both professional services, engineering, environmental, and sustainability, and all the execution, what it looked like to have a truly inclusive, capital stack and development team. And it was, I don't have a theory. I don't have a white paper or a subcommittee. You just do it, right? And you got to do a little bit of groundwork in terms of building some new relationships. And all the relationships aren't perfect. Everybody didn't execute and knock it out of the ballpark. Some people flopped, but it would have been the same thing if I went the other route. If I went with other massive firms, inevitably somebody was going to step on their own foot and be clumsy, right? So, I think it's all about leadership, and if you want to, you will.
Yeah, that equitable type of allyship across the board, and then trickling down, top down, as well as ground up. It's got to, come both ways too. I love
it. Does, and then I think to another side, now we've grown and we've got these much larger developments that Galleria and Humboldt Park are both about $40 million developments each. 4300 West Roosevelt is an $80 million development. Some of the smaller contractors aren't ready yet for that big of opportunity. So you know what we did, Rose? Joint venture. Hey, Rose's company isn't ready to take a $30 million contract yet. Why don't we partner her with a larger firm? And we did it even with my own company. 548 Development that does not have the balance sheet to do an $80 million deal by itself. So my partner is the related company. Good old Stephen Ross. He's our partner. And we're joint ventured. He's got the balance sheet to get the deal across the finish line. I have some skills that I can add to the proposition, and we joint ventured, and that's how it happens. And that's how people grow, right? And being intentional and saying, hey, I'm not ready yet, but put me in the game where I can do at least add my version of value. I can learn and grow, and maybe I'll be ready the next time. But it takes intentionality and leadership.
Yeah. And maybe if we can touch on the leadership that you experienced at the local government level, which I don't hear these stories that often about elected officials actually going out and grabbing individuals, particularly individuals of color, and saying, hey, you have a spot here. How would you, maybe encourage even state or local elected officials to do that more? What would you tell them as well?
Yeah, to me, they have the biggest opportunity, right? Because, their intentionality, because I think the public institutions, frankly, have the biggest responsibility and role in this in terms of their ability to set the new standard for inclusivity. They can build capacity. You're seeing this in the city of Chicago, and I frankly, because I'm from Indiana and my business has grown in Chicago, I see the stark contrast of intentionality. I would have never been able to do this and grow this much if I was still back home in Indiana. But because Chicago has this whole platform of intentionality up and down every single major development. There's intentional inclusivity goals, and you got to meet them or you can't get public financing. Versus when I go home to Indiana, there's none of that. And then the proof becomes the pudding, because there are thousands of successful businesses in the city of Chicago because of those programs, both at the city, county, and state level, because it's a priority. And then there's people that push back. Because I'm from Indiana, I can always hear the pushback in the back of my head. The pushback is always, we don't care about DEI, this, that, that's, wokeness, blah, 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 the derogatory phrases these days. But who hires? The data is clear. Nobody is hiring in the west side of Chicago more than companies that look like us. So if you want to change the narrative in those communities, you really want to change the public safety narrative in those communities, you've got to create jobs and opportunities. Well, the people that are hiring in those neighborhoods look like me. So when I get contracts, 10 new people get jobs. And the trickle down effect, if you believe in trickle down economics, is pretty straightforward. And so I think that there's a ripple effect, or lack thereof, of that intentionality and how it impacts all the other portions of our economy and society.
Couldn't have said it better. I wanted to go back to, I know you had mentioned briefly about Humboldt Park and that project, as a sustainability project, but we were talking kind of previously that it's more, this is more than just a sustainability project. There are other aspects to Humboldt Park, and I wanted to give you the space and the time to kind of, take the audience through it and share and showcase the great work that you've been able to do in that project, and maybe expand on that.
Thank you for the setup. I appreciate that. I love all projects equally, in case this is a recorded line. I love all of them equally. But Humboldt Park is unique because of a couple of things. One, it's a 60-unit apartment complex that we're building. Ground floor commercial will be a grocery store. It's on Chicago Avenue, and we are doing it. It will be all electric. It will be passive house, and it will have multiple level 3 EV charging stations, and it will be solar powered. And what is special about that is that, one, that checks like all the boxes by itself, right? Yeah, that is all of it. That is it by itself. But then what we did was we were intentional about who was the engineer, the civil engineer, the electrical, MEP, structural. There's a joint venture between two women that are the prime GCs. Is a joint venture between two women. The engineer, the lawyer, all the lawyers are women and people of color on that deal. We just really did a good job with that project, and it will break ground October 13th is what it's scheduled for. And so we have worked very hard. Actually, April 13th, it goes to final city. Bless you. And we are just really proud of that project. And so, it's really kind of pushing the envelope, all electric, solar powered, level 3 EV charging. A lot of people talk about the gaps in infrastructure in terms of, if you look at a map of Chicago and where are quality level 2 EV charging stations, let alone level 3 EV charging stations. There are none south of 47th Street or west of Western. We will have quadrupled that number by ourselves. So, I'm darn proud of what we're doing with these type of developments and the kind of the impact in these communities.
And can maybe you give us a little bit more of a color on what the community dynamics are when you say there's none past 47th? I don't live.
Yeah.
I'd love to get an understanding of what that kind of means.
Essentially assume that about 2/3 of the city has no EV charging infrastructure. Wow. That's essentially what that means. And so, Chicago goes way into the hundreds and you're talking nothing south of 47th. You know, when you go west of Western, I'm talking like literally barely a third of the city going west. Everything else, no EV charging stations. And so essentially, like, you know, EV is going to become, the norm, but we've got to have the infrastructure to support it. How else are we going to do that without being intentional with our inside of these communities? That means each of these developments needs that type of commitment of resources. And it just can't be talked about. It's got to just get done.
And when you're compiling all of the market forces that are required for a project like this, on a scale of 1 to 10, is it difficult? Is it easy? Are there still barriers that you're knocking up against? You know, whether go ahead.
No, you got me going again. So the short answer is yes. And, you know, I think part of the problem as we started with the company in 15 is there's always the concern about, are you the right face for this? Are you the right balance sheet for this? Right? Because historically companies like mine would be owned by some billionaire guy or some real rich person from whatever, and I'm regular, I'm just a regular dude. I just care a boatload. And so one of the concerns that the banks continuously have is, this is great and this pencils and you've hired really capable people. Are we sure you're the right maestro for this? And that world is very antiquated. And so that has been the biggest hurdle, frankly, is the banks, which has been the hurdle from the beginning, very similar to the venture capital and angel market, where people love what we're doing. There's just always that, kind of cloud of, are we sure it's him? Are we sure we're comfortable with him being the lead singer? Which, frankly, I always say, I don't got to lead sing. I can play the bongos as long as the work gets done. And that matters more than anything. And so, we've been lucky to find, we were really lucky to have a mayor who put a lot of pressure on the banks to make sure myself and my peers were treated with respect from the banks and taken seriously. And that helped a lot. I mean, it helps when one of the biggest cities in the world, the mayor is bullying the banks. That's what a mayor's supposed to do, and so we were really grateful about that. So yeah, that part was an uphill battle, but since then we've been flying. It's been great.
Okay, that's amazing to hear. 2 more questions, and then I'll leave some time for Q&A. One, just kind of wrapping up that side of the story, and 2, maybe pivoting to kind of legacy and leaving behind and family. I see you as like a decarb electrification, like rock star, but understanding that our language doesn't always translate, and you are dealing with a assortment of business entities that you have to get on your side at the end of the day. When it comes to sustainability, when it comes to electrification, energy efficiency, heat pumps, using all of these terms that we are so familiar with, what do you feel like translates and might need some help to better translate to all of the outside factors that at the end of the day have to give the check off for you to go and do your work? Yeah,
what translate? It's a great question, Rose. A couple things. I think one, I think it's going to be important. One of the things that's going to be important, and I meant this earlier about open sourcing what we're doing, is as we complete this next round of passive house all electric projects, I'm going to openly share the data. I'm going to put it on the website and share the costs associated with every single decision and the impact for the tenants. Because the question that I get from other developers, particularly market rate, the skyscraper guys, is, yeah, that's cool, but does it pencil? How's it impact the pro forma? And so I want to show them, they may not want to go all the way to passive, but could they make a better decision on HVAC? Could they upgrade their decisions on windows? Could in those type of, could they go a smidge higher on insulation, both in the roofing and the roof and the walls? And those are things that can make a big difference in terms of building performance. So I think that's part one. I think the other part of the conversation in the language is both for that's speaking to developers. I think speaking to the communities at large is, you know, the lived experience. We don't talk enough about the impact of the respiratory system to families that live with natural gas in the home and how that impacts, as well as lowering utility bills. I think as we can showcase that, I think we'll get more buy-in at the ground level. And so I think those are kind of two different languages that we got to speak. And then the third thing that I'm really passionate about is pitching a bigger tent about who's in the conversation. And I'll give you an example that I use. I was listening to a sports radio guy years ago, and he was making the case on his radio show. Now follow me here, Rose, for a second. He says, Indianapolis should never get the Super Bowl. And I said, that sounds about right. He said, now prove to you why. And he says, I'm going to open up the phone lines, and I want everyone from Indianapolis to tell me what's the best restaurant in Indianapolis. And he opens up the phone lines, and everyone calls him and says, St. Elmo's Steakhouse. And if you've ever been to Indianapolis, it is the best restaurant in Indianapolis. And he says, okay, everybody agrees. I'm going to open the phone lines. Everyone call me and tell me the best restaurant in New York.
Ooh.
And what do you think they said? 500 different things, right?
Yeah.
Here I am in Chicago, and I open to the conversation, who's the best sustainable engineer? And they all agreed on one. Who's the best architect for sustainability? They all said Doug Farr. And I said, that is shameful. We should have 100 Doug Farrs. And I love Doug. Doug's a personal friend. We should have 50 great engineers that can lead on sustainability. So anytime people give us that we've got to push back on that notion. So I hired Doug for one of my projects, Gallery 89, and I told Doug, you're going to partner with a minority architect firm, and all the engineers you usually work with, you can't work with them on my projects. Go find new friends. And that's played out well for us. And I think we've got to be intentional inside of the sustainability community of pushing back on the same people getting more and more and more of the same and saying, hey, who else does this? Is anybody else interested? Or maybe they're not interested. They don't even know, that they can participate and get in this, and maybe we can sell them on an opportunity to buy in, right? And so I pushed back, and I know that random sports analogy took us a path, but it really meant something about we should not be in agreement on this.
Mm-hmm.
We should have lots of options, and I think that's going to be important for us in the sustainability community.
And we do, and that was your initial. We do have a lot of options. We just need to make sure that the leaders at the top are on board with ensuring that those options are on the table.
Gotcha.
Yes. All right. I want to go back to what you said because it reminded me of my mama when you go make new friends. Tell me about family. Like what keeps you up at night? I know we share in having kids and all the good things. And what do you want to leave behind for them? What's your tagline?
Well, I don't know how to tagline. I think the thing I start to sound real corny really quickly, but service. The thing that I'm going to really impress upon my son, and then also, I think we're going to announce now that we're expecting baby number 2, and so I'm not going to define service or community to my children, but they will serve, and they will serve their community however they want to define that. And I think that's going to be important because I think we've got to get away from this kind of inward, my experience only lifestyle, and that we have to really focus on who else can we help execute on their goals and bettering their lives. And so that is the thing that I'm really pressing on my son. It's just right now we're sharing and that's important, which he's really good at, and cheersing, because I really want to both service and community, but also celebrate, because to know me is to know I like to have a good time, and I really appreciate these type of moments.
Well, AJ, I can't thank you enough. And I love service. I come from a long line myself of civil servants. And before coming to BDC, I just finished 10 years of civil service. And you can do it in various forms. And so now it's here at BDC, and most specifically, we're going to partner with you in the future too. But most important, let's get a drink when I get over there, because I want to go to all of your favorite restaurants, since there's a plethora of them.
Yeah.
And I'll pause it here and ask Jess if there's any questions that might be coming out. If not, we can keep talking. And
we totally have questions. People are excited. First of all, AJ, way to brag that your son's a good sharer. I'm very jealous. Yeah, we are not in the same boat. I thank you so much. I don't even want to take up too much time by just telling you how incredible that was, but we have a lot of great questions. So first from John McKenna, as we ask or require landlords, single family and multifamily, to electrify buildings, what ideas are available to protect renters from displacement if landlords want to raise rents due to electrification costs or improvements?
Yeah, I mean, there's all politics are local. I think one of the interesting things that, and I would be interested to know where John is, what municipalities, but I think there's always nuances in making upgrades to buildings. Then people want to extract value. We frankly try to push back, and that was one of the things when we started the company years ago, was trying to turn the basic real estate development model upside down, in the sense that people are saying, hey, the book says add as little value as possible and extract as much value as you can for yourself, right? That's kind of the real estate mantra in many ways. And what we've done is said, we're going to put value in, but we're going to be intentional about putting it in and making the building operate more efficiently. So if it operates better, then maybe my operating expenses come down, and that's less of a burden that we have to put on the tenants. And now we kind of reach to the same path, assuming that you're willing to be a patient investor, right? And so what John's referring to is people, kind of frankly, a reflection of the kind of the norm, which is, I made the building run a little better. Now I need $50 extra a month out of you, right? And it's unfortunate, because that is kind of what is being taught out there to real estate investors. And you're seeing more state statutes, particularly in Illinois. There's a program called Solar for All, where if you install solar and you're mandated to lower the utility for the common area meter by 50%, but half of that 50 that you're saving needs to be spread out as an impact to the tenants. Now, how you do that is up to you. It could be gift cards, it can be free Wi-Fi, it could be free washer and dryer, but programmatically, that is something that's happening here in Illinois. So John, I commend you on the efforts and the thought process there.
Yeah, and I forgot about Solar for All. It's so great. When I was working on Sunrun, we definitely focused on that. And John, who is in Menlo Park, I encourage you to look at SOMA. That's really more for affordable housing, I think, in California. But it's a similar idea of ensuring that landlords are spreading the love with their tenants when it comes to the savings from solar. Thank you for that answer. So Marty Roach asks, how will tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act help your business model expand? And are there other opportunities in that legislation that you are tracking? Absolutely.
Great question, Marty. And hi, Marty. There you are on screen. Hello. I think the IRA was grossly undervalued. I think the IRA is going to impact this country in ways that we can't account for yet. There are still 2 levels of IRS guidance that is set to come out in Q2 and Q3, whether it's energy communities or LMI communities inside the IRA in terms of the investment tax credit, where there's a world now through the Inflation Reduction Act, where if you install solar and it impacts low-income communities, you get a 60% federal tax credit. That is unreal. And so we are banking on it in many ways. We think we're going to be able to create thousands of jobs and help thousands of families because of it. We're going to expand to 3 other markets because of it. The IRA is, frankly, it's been undercounted. Its impact is going to be felt for some time.
Cool. I love that. Love excitement over the IRA. So I think we have another question from Allison McMunn. And, I think that you touched on this when you said that you want to put costs on the website for everybody to really understand. But do you have any analysis on residential energy saving costs and or comparison to building all electric or passive house versus standard built with gas?
We plan, can you restate that again for me?
I feel that I like in there. Do you have any analysis comparison to build this all electric versus standard built with gas?
Yeah, no. The short answer is no, on the scalable sense. So if we circle back in 18 months, I will have all the data, all of our heart's desire across 2 passive house all electric and then 1 adaptive reuse. So we're doing 2 all electric buildings and 2 passive house buildings at the exact same time. The 2 all electric non-passive are adaptive reuse. The 2 passive are new construction. So all of those are coming in the next 18 months will be complete, and they all break ground in October. So, and then once we're done, we're going to put all the construction data, decisions, trees, all that out there, open source for everyone to have. Now, obviously there's market data in there because we're using Chicago union labor. And then it's also weird because right now we're post-COVID, costs are, nuts right now still. So, you have to account for that, but we're going to put everything out there. No trade secrets.
I love that. So we have 3 more questions, not a ton of time. So I'm going to choose really quickly here.
I'll go quick.
Okay, well, the first next question comes from Jessica Yap, who asks, how did you build a relationship with someone as influential as Doug in order to tell him to make new friends and be able to push back? I do think that those interpersonal relationships can really play a role in these types of decisions, right? 2
things. One, frankly, Jessica, I think that's the only thing I'm good at is the relationship part. I think my superpower is being self-aware and making friends. And I don't claim to be anything other than that. And so I've known Doug for some time, and I took Doug to coffee about 5-6 years ago. And I said, Doug, I'm a nobody with doing 6 flats on the South Side right now. I said, but when I get my first big deal, I'm going to call you, and I'm not going to let you play with any of the toys you're used to playing with. And he sat back. This is 5-6 years ago. And he said, I don't know who you are, kid, but yes, I'll follow up. And when I called him back and said, hey, this is it, he says, I remember you because I'll never forget you telling me that. And he knew how sincere I was about this effort. And, him and I joke that we have like a buddy cop film coming out soon. But he knows that I'm sincere about this. So I think people remember how much you care. And I think people can buy in from that. You just have a plethora of amazing stories, I gotta say. Like, you could write a little book of essays and I would buy it in a second.
Oh my gosh, it's like the opening of a movie. I can just see that. I was like imagining this Jerry Maguire moment, but it was even better.
I know. So great. It calls him 5 years later. Right. It's truly excellent. All right. So Ted Tiffany asks if you can talk about the Innovation Center in your development plans. Are you planning a workforce training center? My friend Ted, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Ted knows how to lead. Thank you, Ted. Appreciate it. So one of the things that's really important is workforce development and combining. There's all this opportunity based on the Inflation Reduction Act to build out clean energy. But what we're seeing is this gap of the labor force. And so my foundation, and one of the photos that were kind of floating around, I was lucky enough to make the 40 under 40 list. And so one of the photos is me actually speaking at the reception. And at the reception,
the CEO of Summit Ridge, which is one of the big solar development companies based in DC, they came to my reception and surprised me with a $600,000 donation to my foundation to seed the 548 Energy Institute so that we can start training people in the communities how to install solar. And so they gave us that they didn't just write the big check. They sent the wire after, which is even more important than the big photo op. And so we got the money and started the program. The program starts April 10th, and we're going to teach people how to install solar. And that larger program, then we're going to host it at the Catholic school on the west side. And we've now have an ask to the governor and the future mayor to back a new larger facility to house the institute so that we can train thousands of people a year to get them into the clean economy. And so we are actively fundraising with corporate partners. So if you know any corporates or philanthropic entities that would be interested in such a thing, feel free to make an introduction. But we are going full steam and bringing more people into the economy, both in the clean economy, both as a partner on the business level, but also in the labor and the workforce. Thank you, Ted.
That is awesome. So excited. So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time here and just say thank you so much again. This was a really awesome conversation. Seems like everybody's excited and ready to just give you $1 million bajillion dollars, which is always the point of these BDC Presents. And so if, we're going to close up, but I'm sure that there are people who would love to contact you afterwards. So we will talk about following up with any information, and we'll be sending along the slides and the recordings in our resource center. And if anybody has any further questions or comments, please reach out to us, Ashley, our membership manager, or direct to the rest of the team. Thank you so much again. AJ, thank you. Rose, you're just an incredible rock star as well, and I could do an entire BDC Presents just on you. So
great job, Rose.
Thank you, everybody. All right, AJ. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Bye.